This episode is brought to you by Hasa. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hey, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. It's been a while since I've talked about pool filter PSI. I'm going to go over this with you here, and this is a critical part of pool maintenance and something that I think you have to really pay attention to. And if you've been doing this for a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'll unpack this here so you'll learn all you need to know about PSI and pool pressure gauges. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. What exactly is it when we refer to the PSI or the filter pressure? A lot of times you're going to hear in the industry we say, what's the PSI? Or some people will say, what's the filter pressure? They're both indicating the same thing. PSI does actually stand for something, and that's pounds per square inch, and that's what that stands for. But no one really talks about it in that detail. We just say the word PSI, and that's kind of the way of us describing what the pressure of the filter is. So it's the amount of resistance in the filter itself. In an easy sense to get an idea, the higher the PSI in the filter, the less flow is going back into the pool. So if you have a filter at 20 PSI, it's going to have a lot more flow than a filter at 35 or 40 PSI. And that's because there's more resistance at 30 or 40 PSI than there is at 15 or 20 PSI. And every pool system is slightly different. There's a Facebook group in Florida called 14 PSI, and that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek because someone had said that the clean filter pressure of a cartridge filter in Florida, which typically are those single cartridge filters, is 14 PSI. That's debatable, of course, but they stuck with it, and that's how they named their group. But basically, the pressure gauge, when the filter is clean, will give you an indication of what your starting pressure is. And it's a little bit different at every pool, a little bit different per filter type as well. And so this is something that you'll learn out there, is that every pool you go to will have a slightly different PSI starting as far as when the filter is clean. And you'll know some pools, the PSI will be different as well, indicating when the pool is dirty. Just as a rule of thumb, the higher the PSI, the more likely there's resistance, and the slower water will circulate, which means that the pool may not look as good if the pool is at 20 PSI versus 30 PSI. 20 PSI, the water clarity will be better. The flow will be better. If you have a spillway, a spa spillway or water features, you'll notice that 20 PSI, if that's your clean filter pressure, again, it differs at every pool. You'll notice the water coming out of the water features are spilling over the spa very rapidly, but when that gets to 30 PSI, the water is not moving quite as much, or it trickles over the spillway maybe, and the water features may not even be returning water. When I get to a pool and I look at it, I'll always assess what's going on with the pool, and if there is a spa spillway and I notice that the water is just barely trickling over into the pool, right away my first thought is that the filter PSI is high and the flow to that pool is restricted. Now for some practical applications here as far as pool PSI, you're going to have a difference in the dirty level of the filter really based on the filter type. And I'll give you a good example here. If you had a 60 square foot D filter and the clean PSI is 20, when it goes to 30 PSI, that's usually a good indicator that that filter is pretty dirty. The water flow will be restricted. So you'll have to take that D filter apart or backwash that D filter if you can to lower the PSI down. But if you have a cartridge filter, a 4-cartridge quad filter, let's just say it's 520 square feet, and it's at 20 PSI, and then 4 months later, it's still at 20 PSI. It hasn't changed at all over the course of 4 months. And that's really typical of a cartridge filter. The quad type cartridge filters, you're not going to see a huge fluctuation in the pressure of that filter, even though a D filter after 4 months is definitely going to go from 20 to 30 PSI easily because it's going to get full of dirt. That pool with a cartridge filter, again a 500 square foot cartridge filter, the pressure gauge is not going to change from 20 PSI to 30 PSI typically on a cartridge filter because there's a lot more square footage of area in a cartridge filter. You're talking a 60 square foot D filter. By the way, there's other factors as well. DE is set up differently. The grids are coated with diatomaceous earth, allowing for less flow when it starts to get dirty. That's a big factor, regardless of the square footage. With a cartridge filter, since you have all these pleats in the cartridges, even when the cartridge starts to get really dirty, you're not generally going to see a quad cartridge filter, the PSI change in that filter. And so this is why it's really important to understand the type of filter the pool has and the starting PSI and when the filter actually needs to be cleaned, not just based on the PSI of the filter gauge, but also of the water quality of the pool that you're seeing, and just, of course, common sense with the amount of time that you normally would clean the cartridge filter and a D filter. So typically in my area, we clean the filters every 4 to 6 months because we have full-size, 4-cartridge filters or full-size D filters. And in between, we're backwashing D filters. Cartridge filters, you don't have to do that because there's a larger capacity. Now, if you have a single cartridge filter, or if you're in an area where the cartridge filters are usually single cartridge, you're going to notice a definite increase in the PSI as that cartridge filter starts to get dirty. I'm talking about a 150 square foot cartridge filter by itself. This will be something that you'll notice the PSI going up on versus the quad 4-cartridge type filter. So it's important to note when you clean the filter or put new grids in the D filter or put new cartridges in the cartridge filter, what exactly is that starting PSI? Now here's where it gets a little tricky with variable speed pumps, because what truly is the starting PSI on a variable speed pump? And I'll default to a single speed pump to give you an idea of where your starting pressure should be. So if you have I'm going to just use my previous examples, a 4-cartridge 500 square foot filter and a 60 square foot D filter, and you have a variable speed pump, you would want to put that pump at the maximum speed, 100% speed, which is the 3450 RPMs of a single speed pump. And you would run that for a couple minutes, and then you would mark the pressure gauge at that point of what that would be at the full pressure or the full speed of that pump. And this is where the PSI gets really tricky out there, and why it's something that as we get more and more variable speed pumps, it's getting much harder to rely on the standard, 10 PSI over the clean mark means that the filter is dirty. It's very difficult out there with variable speed pumps, especially if you get to the pool and it's not running at high speed, to really tell if that filter is dirty. And that's why you have to understand other factors in the pool that indicate that the flow is not working. Automatic cleaner, if you have a suction cleaner, it's not moving rapidly in the pool or moving correctly or just sitting there. The spa spillway, the water clarity, if it's getting cloudy, then the filter may need to be cleaned because the indicator of the pressure on a lower speed will not let you know if that filter is clean or dirty. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. So logically, if you have a DE filter or a sand filter and you want to know if the filter needs to be backwashed, go ahead and put it on the full 3450 100% output on the variable speed pump, which is the full speed, high speed, full speed. And then you'll look at the pressure gauge, and that will be a good indicator for you if that filter needs to be cleaned. For instance, if you have a D filter and you suspect, it's been 3 months since you cleaned it, that maybe the pool needs to be cleaned, turn it on full speed. And if the clean PSI is 20 and you turn on full speed and it's showing 32 PSI or something like that, then you know for a fact that that filter needs to be backwashed. And so with the variable speed pumps, turn them on full speed, full output to get an idea of if that filter needs to be cleaned. It doesn't really matter too much, again, with the cartridge filters, if it's a quad cartridge filter, what the actual PSI is on low speed, medium speed, or high speed, because that gauge is not really a good indicator of when that cartridge need to be cleaned. The only time I've ever really seen the pressure rise on a quad cartridge filter is when the cartridges start to get really old. The bands are broken. It's been 3 or 4 years since they've been changed. They're not really that great in great quality or shape. Then the PSI will definitely go up somewhat in a quad cartridge filter to indicate that the cartridges are going bad. But again, you won't really know until you take it apart and clean it. And that's why it's really important to be on a standard filter cleaning cycle. In my area, I clean all my filters in March, and then I clean them again in October, September, October. Every 6 months, I clean the filters. So regardless of the PSI, I know my pools and I know which filters tend to get dirty during those periods in between the filter cleaning, which ones stay relatively clean. And you'll get to know this more on your route. And you won't rely so much on the filter pressure of the gauge, but more or less on the sense of the pool. You're going to know this pool pretty well and the filter of the pool and when that filter needs to be cleaned. I would say a sand filter is very similar to a D filter as far as the pressure or PSI. And a sand filter, let's say 20 PSI is clean. When it gets to 30 PSI, you're going to see definitely a drop off in the flow of the pool. And you're going to have to, of course, backwash that sand filter, just as if you would backwash a D filter. The only difference is with a D filter, you're going to have to recharge that filter with some diatomaceous earth. And that was a pretty long segment unpacking why the pressure gauge is sometimes not the best indicator, although they're on the filter for a reason. And I'll give you some indicators of the pressure gauge when you're going to notice a pretty major problem. So if you get to a pool and the pressure gauge is near zero, even on a medium speed or low speed and a variable speed pump, if it's just at zero, there could be a couple things going on at this point. Number one, that pressure gauge could be broken. So tapping it with your finger is a great indicator of if that's working or not, especially if it's getting older. The second thing that's probably happening there is that there's something going on with the actual pump itself and it's not being able to pull the water from the pool. Sometimes it's just something as simple as low water in the pool, and that's why the pressure gauge is low. Could be running dry. If you look into the pump lid and you see air in there but no water moving, then of course it has run dry, as we call it in the industry, and you're going to have to reprime that pump. A lot of times, if something gets past the pump basket into the impeller, you'll notice that the PSI is really low, and that the pump indicator with the pump is that when you look into the clear lid, the water is only about halfway up. It's not all the way to the top, and there's a lot of air in there. I usually turn off the pump, take the basket out, and then I'll take a flathead screwdriver and I'll spin the impeller to dislodge any debris in there. I'll fill up the pump with water, turn it back on, and typically the PSI will return to normal. So low PSI is an indicator that the pump isn't pulling the water properly for any number of reasons, but typically a clogged impeller or low water, or the pump ran dry, or the O-ring is bad on top. And then on the other side of that, really, really high filter pressure, high PSI, can indicate some blockage in the filter. And this could be a very dangerous situation. So if you turn on the pool and you notice the PSI spikes from 0 and it goes all the way to 50, all the way to the end of the gauge, there's a serious problem. And if you know your pools pretty well, you're going to know when there's a problem. I have this one cartridge filter. There's a lot of cypress trees around it. So whenever I clean this cartridge filter, I know for a fact that there's going to be some cypress leaves that get back into the return line when I take the cartridges out. It's just unavoidable in this pool. And so when I turn this pool on, I always watch for a spike in the PSI. So it's a quad cartridge filter. I'll clean the filter. I'll turn it back on. And if it's at 20 PSI, I'm fine. But if I turn it back on and it's at 30 PSI or 35, then I know that there's some cypress debris that's clogged in the return line. And I'll usually unscrew the salt cell, clean that out, and then that's usually fine. So every pool is a little bit different, but sometimes a really high PSI, like 40 or 50, means that there's some kind of blockage in the return line. Another pool that had a similar problem, and this was a check valve that broke off and got jammed into the heater, and that was slowing down the flow, and it was giving me a really high PSI in that pool. So in summary, basically, if the PSI goes up by 10 in a D in sand filter, that's a really good indicator that you have to backwash those, and with D filter backwash and recharge it. With a sand filter, just backwash it. With a cartridge filter, if it's a single cartridge filter, you'll notice an increase in the PSI from, let's say, clean PSI of 15, and then if it gets to 25 or 30, that cartridge filter needs to be cleaned or replaced. For the quad cartridge filters, not much change in the PSI with those. So those, the main indicator is the water quality and the flow of the pool. And every pool is a little bit different. And so you're going to have to know your filters and know when the PSI indicates that the pool is dirty. But being on a standard timetable, of course, cleaning your single cartridge filters every month, cleaning the quad cartridge filters every 4 to 6 months, cleaning the D filters every 6 months. This will give you an idea of when the pool filter is getting dirty. And the water quality will definitely be a hint. The spa spillway, the automatic cleaner. Look for those kind of hints rather than relying solely on the PSI of the filter gauge. Back in the day, we could rely on that completely for sand filters and D filters. But with all these variable speed pumps out there, the filter PSI is not a good indicator any longer that the filter needs to be cleaned. It is a good indicator if there's a problem. Again, really low PSI indicates a problem with the pump or the impeller. Really high PSI indicates a problem with the return flow to the pool. And then you have a lot of different things in between, but mainly a dirty filter will cause the PSI to rise in a DE in a D and sand filter, not so much in a larger cartridge filters. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. Click on the podcast icon on the banner. There'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,900 podcasts there for you. If you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.